Before wrapping up this section on podcast production, now that we've covered a lot of the hardware essentials, there is one more thing that I think is very important to talk about, and that is microphone technique, both for you and any potential podcast co-hosts or guests. Because even the best microphones aren't going to sound great if they're not used correctly. So understanding how your specific microphone works and how to properly use it will not only help your podcast to sound its best, but it's also going to help you to avoid making a bunch of common mistakes that can annoy your audience or just turn them off completely where they don't want to listen to your show anymore. Let's start by talking about pickup patterns so you can pick up some knowledge on pickup patterns. Microphones have several different types of pickup patterns. In general, I think the most common type is what's called a cardioid pickup pattern. And what this means is the microphone picks up sound sort of in a sphere shape in front of the capsule. And it's not just a flat thing. It's kind of an orb that goes in front of the capsule over here. And you can sort of hear that on this microphone here. If I go over to the side, you can kind of hear my voice sort of fade out a little bit. If I go towards the front, now you hear it picking it up. And then I go out of that pickup pattern and it goes away over there. So if I'm on the side of the microphone, you're really not hearing much. You're hearing essentially the reflection of sounds over there. But when it comes to cardioid pickup patterns, there is a little bit of sound pickup out of the back of the microphone. Now, obviously that did not sound really great, but it's just sort of something to be aware of. I think it's just a technical law of physics with how capsules and things work. They pick up most sound up here, but there's sort of like this little lobe that pops out in the pickup pattern. And it's just something to know that if there's close sound happening behind the microphone, it's more likely to get picked up, even though the microphone's not pointed directly at it. You can kind of hear as I'm snapping my finger to the side of the microphone, you don't hear it as much. But now when I go behind the microphone, it becomes a lot more obvious. So that just has to do with where you position yourself, where you position your microphone, and where you position other microphones as well. Some microphones have what's called a supercardioid pickup pattern, which is basically the same thing, but even narrower. So that means you need to be really in line with this pickup pattern to get picked up. And the reason you would want to use a microphone with a supercardioid pickup pattern is if you're somewhere where you really want to try to hone in on specific sound and block out a lot of other noise and stuff. And some microphones have what's called a bidirectional pickup pattern. This one actually is a warm audio microphone. That's the brand. And the audio, I guess, sounds warm. But this actually has a little switch on it that lets me switch the pickup pattern. So right now I'm in the cardioid pickup pattern. I can go over here and things are normal. But if I put it into the bidirectional pickup pattern, what that means now is I turn the microphone, my voice is going to fade out. And now when I get to the back of the microphone, it's not just that weird little sound that the cardioid pickup pattern has. It's the full microphone sound. So it's the full sound from the front and the full sound from the back. And so that means with a bidirectional pickup pattern, you could put the microphone between you and someone else, and two people could use the same microphone, either for spoken word. This is a microphone that tends to be used a lot more for music production. So for things like singing or even picking up instruments or singing while playing an instrument, there's a lot of reasons why you might want a bidirectional pickup pattern. And as you might have guessed, if a microphone can pick up sound from the front and the back, there are also some microphones or some pickup pattern options called omnidirectional, which means now as I turn the microphone, my voice should not be changing at all. It's the same from every direction of the microphone. This microphone is now just picking up sound from all angles equally, and it doesn't really matter. Obviously, that means now it's going to be picking up sound everywhere. So if I'm just in a room recording myself talking and I have an omnidirectional microphone picking up sound everywhere, I'm going to get a lot of unwanted noise and room tone. Whereas if I go back to that cardioid pickup pattern, now it's focusing directly on me instead of the room as a whole. Now there are a few other niche pickup patterns out there, but those are kind of the most common: cardioid, supercardioid, bidirectional, and omnidirectional. So the reason I'm telling you that when it comes to mic techniques is just to remind you to take some time to know the specific pattern of your specific microphone, so that way you can use it as effectively as possible to get the best sound as possible. And it's also very important to keep your microphone's pickup pattern in mind if you're using more than one microphone, so that you can avoid mic bleed as much as possible, which again is when both microphones start to pick up the same sound, and it can make things just not sound their best, and it can make editing super difficult. So for example, if I was using two omnidirectional microphones next to each other and I was going to edit that audio, it would be a nightmare because each microphone would be picking up everything from every direction, and it would kind of be a mushy mess. Then I probably shouldn't be using two omnidirectional microphones super close to each other. But the most common scenario that people find themselves in when recording with multiple microphones is that they have two cardioid pickup patterns and they need to know how to position their microphones. So the easiest thing to do is to just position your mics kind of at a 45-degree angle away from each other, putting each microphone in the other's dead zone where it's not picking up a lot of sound, and that's going to give you the least amount of mic bleed. So for example, now I have this SM7B turned on, if I have this microphone pointed directly to me along with the Rode NT1, now you're hearing sound from both microphones. But if I point the SM7B slightly away, where now I know the pickup pattern is over here, so I'm kind of in that zone where it's not picking anything up. Now I've reduced the amount of my mic bleed that's happening here. I probably also wouldn't want these to be right close to each other. I would want to, if there was a person sitting next to me, they would be over here talking and I would be over here. So even if you're sitting side by side with someone, you don't want to just have two microphones directly in front of them, because then those two people are going to start bleeding onto each other's mics. I can be over here not being picked up too much on this one, and I can be over here not being picked up too much on that one. And obviously then if we were on like other ends of the table or something like that, then it would be even easier to avoid mic bleed. But understanding your mic's pickup pattern can really help avoid problems that can happen with things like microphone bleed. But understanding the pickup pattern of your microphone is really only part of the equation. Avoiding excessive breath and plosive sounds, kind of like we talked about earlier, is another thing to keep in mind. Those plosives, the P sounds, Peter Piper pitched a podcast. If every time I made a P sound, you kind of heard that like pop, you really wouldn't be able to listen to this or to my podcast for very long. That's anytime too much air is hitting the microphone's capsule. So this Rode NT1 that I mentioned has a cardioid pickup pattern, but if you notice, I'm not speaking directly in front of it, and I'm not using a pop filter or a windscreen, which would help me. But in this case, I want to be able to see you, or want you to be able to see me. I can't actually see you right now, don't worry. I want you to be able to see me clearly. I don't want the microphone in front of my face, and I also don't want to cause a bunch of plosives. So I have the microphone, the front of the microphone is sort of at an angle. It's facing this way, and it's a little bit lower, and it's just sort of, it's positioned in a way where I'm in the middle of that cardioid pickup pattern, but my breath, all the air that's coming out when I talk, is going past the microphone and not into the microphone. And that means I can still get the best sound from this microphone without having to worry about plosives. I am also paranoid of plosives, plosive paranoia, so I am wearing my headphones to make sure that way I know exactly what things are sounding like as I'm recording them. So what you'll notice with myself and a lot of people who use microphones very often is that we very rarely speak directly into the front of the microphone, because that does then put you at risk for unpleasant sounds like breath and plosives. And if I had my microphone positioned like this with a pop filter or a windscreen or both, then I would be just, I'd be set for kind of any situation. As we're talking about mic technique, let's go back to talking about boom arms. You're going to be using some sort of stand. Don't hold the microphone like I've been doing a lot throughout this. This is just for demonstrative purposes, since I'm changing mics so often for examples and I don't want to keep putting them on different stands. Reducing handling noise is very important. If you did have to hear me sort of hand holding the microphone and giving all this handling noise the whole time, even though the microphone is a nice high quality microphone, that is going to be something that's not going to sound great. But as I kind of hinted at in an earlier lesson, if you are hand holding a microphone and you kind of just get that kung fu grip on it, it will help you avoid handling noise. So that way you're not just constantly adjusting and causing those problems. Once you are holding the microphone, just hold it and don't move your hand too much, and then that will be pretty good. But then you have to keep the microphone at the same distance. It's just very hard to handhold a microphone and have it sound consistently good for a long period of time. And as we're talking about proper mic technique, we're also talking just in general about things that you don't want to do that will annoy your listener. So if you're doing an interview and someone's talking and you're just eating a bag of chips on the microphone, that's probably something, unless you're doing a very niche ASMR eating/interview podcast, that's probably something that's going to really annoy the listener. If you've heard people just sort of during interviews, someone's talking and they're just breathing into the microphone really heavily, that can be really, really annoying. There's ways to edit that out, of course, but sometimes people don't do that. And those things, even if your content is great and your story is great, if you have those kinds of poor mic techniques and poor production issues, that can cause someone to not want to listen to your show anymore. So what I tend to do personally is, if there's more than one person in the room, I like to make sure that I'm controlling the mixer when possible. So that way I know I can like mute myself when the other person's talking, unmute them. I can turn the faders up or down to kind of ride the levels there. That takes a lot of attention and a lot of skill. So it's something that does require skill and practice. But also, depending on your recording setup, you might have the option to use multi-track or isolated track recording. So like the Rodecaster here can record every track individually, and I can get separate files for every microphone connected to it. Same with software, like Ecamm Live can do that. And that means I can put every individual audio track into my editing software and then cut out those things. So if somebody's talking and someone else is breathing very heavily, I can just cut out the part where they're breathing and only use the part where that other person is talking. We'll get into that kind of thing more in the editing section later on, but at the very least, if you're the one not talking and you don't want to be writing the faders and doing all that kind of stuff, if you just kind of lean away from the microphone. At least that's going to help reduce potential breath and stuff. If I'm standing here and I have a cold or something and I'm breathing and I just move over here, then you're not going to hear my breath and my weird sounds and my mouth clicks and noises and things as the other person is talking. Now, something you'll find, especially if you record with other people, is that when we're talking about proper mic technique, initially we're talking about you. If you've never done this before, I want you to learn how to have proper mic technique to make things sound good. But then eventually it kind of shifts to we're actually talking about other people who might be on your show because they might not be used to using a microphone. So you know the proper technique and you know how to do everything. It's very strange, but people can sometimes do goofy things when they use microphones for the first time or they're just really not used to it. Something that happens a lot is if you sit down with someone to record and you ask them to do a mic check beforehand where you check their levels, they will lean in and they'll go, okay, mic check, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, which, by the way, if you're doing a mic check, asking someone to either recite the alphabet or just tell you about their day, tell you what their favorite food's like, just get them talking instead of doing a mic check. Because most people, if you say do a mic check, they'll do mic check, 1, 2, hello. And you kind of need them to keep talking so you can adjust the levels. Ask them a question or ask them to just recite the alphabet, something that's going to let them talk for a significant chunk of time until you get the levels right. But a lot of people, if they're not used to being on a microphone, they will lean forward and they'll be A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And then when it comes time to record, they'll kind of lean back in their chair. And now the levels that you checked and the levels that you set things at aren't going to match what's actually happening. So if you remind your guest or your co-host or whoever that, try to keep their position consistent with the microphone when they do the mic check, talk at the level and the volume that they're going to be talking throughout the show, and just try to be aware of where the microphone is and keep themselves consistently, at the same distance from the microphone. That's going to help everybody sound their best because nobody wants to be on your show and sound bad afterwards. You want them to sound good. You want to make them sound as good as possible. They want to sound good. That's just going to be better for everybody. So it's always important to be aware of good microphone technique, to listen for it throughout your show. And if you need to provide gentle reminders to other people you're recording with, feel free to do that as well. And finally, we'll wrap up this mic technique section talking just a little bit about levels. We'll get more into this when it comes to editing, but if you want to know what the proper level for your microphone is, generally speaking, if you're using a recording device or an application, you're going to see volume meters, sort of those things that kind of bounce up and down and show your audio levels. Most of the time, they're going to have numbers next to them. And a good rule of thumb is that you want your levels bouncing, kind of averaging out around the negative 16 decibel mark. This is going to help things not sound too quiet, not sound too loud, and sound good on the widest variety of listening devices possible. So whether someone has, AirPods in their ear, big headphones, they're listening on a speaker, a car, they're listening on their phones, tiny speaker sitting across the room. You want things to be able to sound their best no matter what on all of those different devices. And if your audio levels are set too loud, you're going to have what's called clipping, which is where things sound distorted and bad. And there's really no way to fix that once your audio clips. And if your audio is too low and too quiet and you try to just boost the levels when you edit, then you're going to start introducing a lot of hiss and noise. And that's also going to be distracting and not sound good. So keeping your levels as good as possible right around that negative 16 mark when you're recording is a good place to start. And of course, a good way to keep a good eye or ear out for good microphone technique is to use headphones while you're recording. Make sure that at least you as the host or the person who's, running the show, if it's a separate person behind a mixer, that they're using headphones and they're listening. Ideally, everyone's using headphones because it just really, really helps. Sometimes, especially with video podcasts, I know not everyone wants to have big headphones on or it just doesn't feel super comfortable, but somebody should be monitoring the audio all the time. Otherwise, things can go wrong and you won't know until it's too late. So now that we've covered the production process, you've got your show concept going, you've got your outline ready to go, you know what equipment you need. Before we jump into the editing process, it's going to be time to make the show. So let's head into the take action lesson where I'm going to give you yet another homework assignment.